Kai!
I don't like these drones. I don't like them.
We've got to get to the fort. Now!
Hey, this is Chris Roper, Editor-in-Chief of the IGN PlayStation team. I'm here today to talk about Heavenly Sword. The game has gotten a lot of press and hype and whatnot since its announcement, partly because of its outstanding visuals and crazy presentation, and also because there, from the outset at least, looks like there's a lot of ties to God of War. And that's not exactly true, but the combat system is similar in some ways. But the part about the presentation and visuals is dead on correct. Sony threw a lot of money at this game, and Ninja Theory went through a lot of work to make sure that the cutscenes in the game were amazing. They got Andy Serkis in there to help, who did Gollum and King Kong. And he came in to do voiceover work for King Bohan, and he directed a lot of the scenes, and they did some crazy facial mocap stuff. All the voice acting in the game is amazing. Basically, the virtual scenes and setups that they have are fantastic. The story is pretty good, but really, the whole thing is tied together by an amazing presentation package. Outside of that, though, unfortunately, the game doesn't hold up as well as we'd hope it would. It's a very pretty package, but there's not a whole lot of depth to it. The combat system of the game is actually pretty deep, and it's different in God of War in that, as opposed to just having a couple buttons that you're working with, you have three different stances in Heavenly Sword. You have a ranged, kind of wide stance, you have a fast, and then a strong stance. And these are pretty good because you can use them differently against different characters, and they actually make sense to use them. Some characters don't really work well with a strong attack, and others don't really work well with the ranged attack, so that all works pretty well. But unfortunately, there's way too much reliance on simply the combat system in the game. You don't really get a whole many different unique environments to fight in. There's too many arena battles. So pretty much the battles are fun when you start, but it quickly becomes tiresome and repetitive, and you keep doing the same thing over and over again. And again, you don't feel like you're progressing a whole lot of times because you're stuck in these rooms where you're just fighting wave after wave of enemies until they're all dead, and then you keep moving on. And on the same sort of note, all you're ever fighting in the game are just enemy soldiers. So basically you have your grunt unit, more heavily guarded grunt unit, and these ninjas, and that's pretty much who you're fighting through the entire game, aside from the bosses. There are also puzzle segments where you have to, you can use aftertouch if you throw a body or whatever, and you can hold down the throw button and sort of steer whatever you've thrown in slow motion. And there are some segments where you have to bounce shields and stuff off of walls in order to make them hit another object and open a door, so that the bounce doesn't work very well, and these segments are just sort of like, you have to keep trying them until you get the correct bounce to get off there, so that just wasn't tweaked very well either. Besides from that, there are a few problems where things weren't tweaked outside of the combat system, like there are the minigame kind of button presses where, sort of taken from God of War, where if you're fighting a boss, you have to press triangle or X or whatever shows on the screen. And these things happen, you have maybe a tenth of a second to hit them some of these times. They're super fast, and it's basically do it once, memorize what you're supposed to do, and then go try it again. And it's sort of like, it feels a lot like Dragon's Lair. There's some pretty entertaining boss battles in the game. Unfortunately, they kind of break down the combat system a little bit because you can just rely on triangle, which happens to break counters, so there's not really a reason to use the square button against them. You might as well just use triangle the whole time, which does help a lot. But again, it kind of halves the control system. A lot of the bosses have a little bit of that sort of pattern recognition thing where they'll go and they'll have a certain attack, and you need to learn how to beat that or dodge it or whatever, counter it and come back at them, so that's kind of cool. None of them are particularly hard. Even the end of the game isn't all that challenging, but they are pretty unique and do help break up that monotonous general soldier fighting a little bit. So that it does help, but it's not enough to make the actual combat in the game through the other 6 hours of the game, because it's not very long, all that unique and make it stand out all that much. So overall, Heavenly Sword is a decent game, but it's kind of odd how close it is to becoming a fantastic game if only a couple of things have been tweaked. The combat gets repetitive after a while, even though the actual system itself is pretty good. Some of the extraneous stuff, like the little mini games and things like that, weren't fleshed out as much as they could be. But the presentation is fantastic, and while the story isn't incredibly deep, it is fun to watch because the presentation was done so well, and the voice acting is amazing and all that kind of stuff. So if you really just want like a hack and slash game basically to go through and something pretty to look at, and the game's only like 6 hours, so you could easily beat this as a rental, and it's worth doing that. It unfortunately is just not as good as I think that everybody had hoped it would be. For the full written review, check it out on IGN.com.
But really, what was I before?